Those that nope the FCK out of a relationship. What was your they are probably crazy red flag moment? She pulled out a knife and started running in circles around the house with it. I was on a bus back home the next day. Edit. I guess I should provide a little context. The short version. Right before that, she was mad about something her cousin had done. So she came in to complain to me about it. I was busy reading Harry Potter and not listening to what she was saying. So she hauled off and punched me in the balls. She immediately had my attention. I jumped up all what the fuck? And she started to try to punch me. I grabbed her by her tiny wrists and stopped her. She settled down a little and I let her go. Then she went and grabbed a knife and started circling the house. In the end she said she wanted to cut herself and not me. But I wasn't cool with any of that. The long version involved her dad raping her. Her mother in prison. She lived with her grandma. She got pregnant. Her grandma died of cancer. She lived with a teacher. The teacher kicked her out because we made the sexy times. She lived with my grandma. She lost the baby. We graduated. We got on a bus and moved across the country to live with her aunt. And then the short version. My second comment on this thread. Met a guy at a club. We kissed and I gave him my number. Started feeling bad as the night progressed so went home. Ended up really sick with gastro. The one where you finally get to sleep only to wake up. Vomit. Wish for death then pass out again. It was a 24-hour bug in total. In that time he had left 30 missed calls and messages on my phone. I did not arrange a date with him. Or call him back. I had only met him the night before. She demanded that I hand over my debit card. Because she, who had never been employed, was clearly better with money than me. Screamed and fought until I have in. Then spent $400 of my money, our money. After less than a year. Supposedly on the wedding of someone I went to high school with. Then she got pregnant. Then she lost the baby. And told me that I killed my baby. Not by violence. But by not obeying her every command as if it were the word of God. That my refusal to acquiesce to her increasingly insane demands stressed her out so much she miscarried. I cried for the first time in 15 years. Like a bitch. Killed in the bathtub. And noped out. She was a self-centered CNT who always played the victim. Man. I was such a dumbass. So many warning signs. She used to disappear and not come home at night. Not answer her phone. Etc. Then. She got pregnant and broke the news by telling me that she flushed her birth control. I respect a woman's right to choose. So now I have a lovely 12-year-old daughter. I still didn't leave. When my daughter was born, she started doing the same thing again. Drinking, screaming, etc. I broke up with her and we started sharing our daughter 1/2 and 1/2. A bit later I transferred to university and stupidly decided to give it one more shot. After living at uni with her and our daughter, I found out all of her trips back home were to have an affair. I was like, what the FCK? I am in college. Work 2 jobs. Take care of the baby. You know. So I noped out. I have had full-time custody of my daughter for 10 years. And her craziness gave me the best gift I have ever received. Not that I'm noping the FCK out. But my girlfriend of 7 years and I just got into a massive fight because I booked my CFA-LVL1 finance designation and want to be back at home. We're overseas on a uni exchange in September to study, which is cutting into our travel time after grad exchange. I've stressed how important this is to me professionally for months. And despite never having made concrete plans of how long we'd travel, now apparently I'm ruining her life experience by wanting to go home earlier than her. I would never put my own leisure ambitions above anything professional or school oriented of hers. Let alone make her feel like shitty for how it would impact me. Feels like it's shifted from us to me and I don't know if I can get over that. Or if I'm in the wrong too for not respecting her new goals. Been a week or 2 now. Seems to me like the red flag that this relationship might have reached its cap. He went through the messages on my phone twice. Each time was after a fight because he knew I would have ranted to my friend about it. Then he tried starting a fight about what he read. Got harassed by him for 3 months after I ended it. Only stopped when I had to get a police officer to go tell him he's not to be anywhere near me anymore or contact me. Found out his first girlfriend got a restraining order against him for the same reasons. Especially frightening when you take into account we were only 17. Went to McDonald's where a pretty 19-year-old blonde girl took my order. I got my food to go and left. As I was leaving I looked back and saw her cleaning the windows. She looked at me and signed call me. So I went back in and she gave me her number. Cool so far. Right? So we made plans for her to come over that night. I went to pick her up and she had this big bag full of clothes and a puppy. She came over and that's when I realized she moved in. She wasn't there to date me. She was there to move in. Next day she goes to work and she leaves all her shit there. So I'm alone with all her stuff. And I do what any normal person who just met a girl who moved in does. I snooped. I went in her purse and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a doctor's prescription with the handwritten instructions that said in big letters no sex for 2 weeks. It was dated 2 days earlier. Apparently she had chlamydia or something. Took me about a week to get her and that dog out of the house, meaning it took her a week to find another dude to stay with. 1. Played Smack My BTCH up at an uncomfortably loud volume when I got into the car on our first date. 2. Told a Holocaust joke on our first real date. Knew my family is Jewish. I asked him not to tell jokes like that so he told a racist one. 3. On our first date told me he planned to have a wife and child in the next few years. I was in my early 20s and had just gotten out of a particularly painful long-term relationship, which he knew about. 4. Told me he didn't know what it was like to feel empathy. And that he had never felt bad for someone or anything he had ever done. Even when he knew it was mean cruel. 5. Said the reason for my previous partner's suicide was because I wouldn't let anyone get close to me. The funny thing is I don't actually think I have bad taste in men. All of the above examples are from the beginning stages of relationships dates that IGTFO of. I'm friends with all of my previous partners but one. We just aren't the same people anymore. And my fiancé is the most wonderful man I've ever met. She broke every bit of glass, plate, window, mirror in our house. Took a knife to the sofa and smashed in the TV. Spent the night driving around drunk looking for me. I was 2 blocks away at my best amigo's house. Located me. Physically assaulted me in front of my friends. And then drove to her parents' house. Grabbed her father's hunting shotgun. And told her parents she was going to blow her head off. She spent 2 weeks in a locked ward and was diagnosed with adult onset schizophrenia. She was legitimately crazy. I dated his guy for a few months. And found out a month or so into our relationship that he had an Instagram account I didn't know about. Wasn't a big deal. I'm not huge into social media anyways. I tried following him. But for some reason I couldn't. I asked him about it. And he played it off saying something must be up with the app. One of my best friends ended up following him a little while later. And my boyfriend at the time didn't know I was friends with this person and accepted. My friend sends me all these screenshots of my boyfriend's Instagram account. Turns out he was a drug dealer using his Instagram to sell all kinds of drugs. I realized he had blocked me. And hid his lifestyle from me during our 4-month relationship. I broke up with him that day. I thanked her for advice that she had given me by texting thanks for the advice and she flipped the FCK out. Asking me why I always have to be so sarcastic and passive aggressive. She could not believe that I legitimately thought it was thankful. Don't remember what it was anymore though. This is precisely the same red flag I just posted about. Except in a somewhat different form. Same underlying issue though. People constantly discovering problems that don't actually exist. As a general rule, people who don't trust others aren't very trustworthy themselves. Told me she couldn't have a baby because something was wrong with her. I thought, oh well, that sucks, but whatever. Constantly asking me about baby related stuff and how she really wants a baby even though she told me she can't. Started to wonder what was up at this point. Went on holiday for a month. Came back and was still dating her and talking constantly, but she had blocked me on Facebook. Getting massive red flags at this point. Started acting altogether really weird. Asked her what was going on and that I just wanted her to be honest. Turned out she was pregnant and is now a single mother. Think I dodged a bullet. I cuddled up next to him and put my hand in the inside of his thigh. He pushed it away and said that's a real turn off. This was after I started noticing he'd shut me down anytime I initiated sex, kissing, etc. He had to be the one to do it. On his terms. I quickly broke up with him and he stalked and harassed me for over a year and had to get a restraining order against him. I met her ex. Completely by chance. He was a totally normal guy who thanked me for jumping on the grenade. I laughed and said she's a little goofy. But he was overstating it. He showed me his text history from the last several months. Which includes some of the time we were together. It was a completely different level of crazy. I didn't know what to make of it. Part of me thought it was fake. Part of me thought maybe their relationship wasn't healthy and made her a little crazy. I couldn't wrap my head around it. When I saw her later I asked. About 10 minutes into the ensuing argument she was accusing me of colluding with her ex to make her kill herself in shame and threatening to have her Marine brother beat me to death. I called her best friend and said she was off the deep end and I left. She didn't do anything beyond harass me and a bit of light cyber stalking for a couple weeks. We had only been together about a month. And I think if I were in deeper it may have gotten much worse. Not really a relationship. But a first date. I was 19 and a junior in college at the time. One of my TAs asked me out. I believe he was 3 years older than I. He picked me up at my apartment and I let him in while I finished getting ready. He started telling me how he could teach me so much about the world and life in general and how I had so much to learn. Blah. 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 Basically, he was saying I was his inferior but he'd be happy to teach me until I was more at his level. It was really a WTF moment. Why someone would think the way to a girl's heart was to disparage her intelligence and tell her how superior you were. I showed him to the door and locked it behind him. I was seriously waiting for him to FCK with my final grade. But he didn't. Which is good because I would have rained some tea down on his stupid head. The guy was 35. Unemployed. And lived in the rental apartment in his parents' house. All things I had no issue with. What got me to nope out on a dime was when he got sick and I offered to go with him to the doctor. Get him medicines. Make him some soup and tea. Etc. And he told me that his mother had already taken care of all of that. We had also been going out for some time, at least a few months, and despite essentially living with his parents he never let us meet and he said he barely mentioned me to them. Clearly there was no room for me in this relationship. On the way to my grandmother's funeral he said. I didn't cry when my grandmother died completely unprompted. He barely knew his grandmother. We ended up getting stuck in the mud on our way. And rather than wait for the tow truck I'd called, he decided he was going to push my minivan out of freshly rained on clay by himself despite my repeatedly asking him not to as it was obviously fruitless. And I had to buy the clothes he was wearing because he didn't have anything funeral appropriate. He tried, and failed, anyway. But luckily a nice man in a jeep came by and pulled us out. I thanked the jeep guy profusely. And told him he'd improved my day more than he knew. Boyfriend sulked the entire day. And after the funeral told me I was ungrateful and rude to have thanked jeep guy more than I thanked him. And asked if I would FCK jeep guy, who was probably 20 years older than me, if I ran into him. When I told him to leave me alone, he asked why I was always pushing him away. She wanted me to come study for finals at her house so I could spend time with her when I wasn't studying. She was incredibly clingy. Never had a day to myself, and then I went to her funeral. Told her I couldn't text because my coach passed and I needed to pay respects. And when I got out I texted her. And she said something along the lines of, "Where the FCK were you? Why weren't you texting me? What's so important you couldn't text me?" I said, "My coach's funeral. I told you I was going to it, fine, that was the official nope." We dated for a few weeks and then the night came to get down. Since having sex doesn't happen often for me, I don't typically keep a condom in my wallet or on my person. She says she wants to FCK and I tell her I don't have a condom. To which she replies it's fine. Being the HRNY non-thinker I got to work. As I'm ready to CM I start pulling out. She grabs my hips and pulls me back inside her and says in me. And of course, that being the hottest thing I've ever heard a woman say to me. I finish inside her. A few weeks go by and she tells me she's late and to be prepared to be a father. Not the most ideal situation, but I put myself in it. I'm going to see it through. Another 2 days go by and she's in tears. I ask what the matter was and she said she got her period. I looked confused and she yelled, "I wanted to have a child with you and it didn't work and now we have to try again." Double quote. I've never ghosted someone so fast in my life. I met a bartender who also happened to be an archaeologist. We planned to go see a comedy show together. We both enjoy stand-up. We were texting back and forth and we kinda touched on the concept that we might end up dating regularly. I said I wouldn't usually date archaeologists as they're always digging up the past. I thought it was equal parts playful and funny. She responded with a tirade about how that kind of joke was completely unacceptable and that she was too much of a feminist for that bullshit. I tried to reason that I was only trying to make her laugh. But as I did I also realized I have no interest in a person who reacts this way. Nope. He couldn't understand why my child's father wouldn't be happy to sign away his parental rights to him and just disappear from our daughter's life. We had been only casually dating for maybe 2 months at the time. And I was still a long way from even allowing him to meet my child. Much less let him adopt her. So, yeah. Prematurity aside. The fact that he considered it a given that an unmarried divorced dad would jump at the chance to abandon his children made him extremely unattractive instantly. Oh. He also wanted to delete our FB pages and make a couples one. At 2 months. I had a girl request that we have sex outside. In the woods. We met online. Naturally. Anyway. We head out to a nice spot and do the deed. She begins sobbing after. I ask her if everything is alright. And she reassures me that it is. Then proceeds to tell me about how she was raped in the woods a couple years back while continuing to sob. Threw a tantrum in her parents' home because she couldn't find her snowboarding pants before our trip the next morning. That had been planned for weeks. Not an adult tantrum where you're passive aggressive and talk a lot of shit after resolving the problem. A child tantrum where she yelled at her sister and started wailing and slamming doors. Realized I was dating somebody no better than the kids that cry on the floor at supermarkets. Didn't wash a bowl in the sink before work. I said I went to do it but got distracted and I didn't. He decided to teach me a lesson by speeding the car up and then slamming the brakes on and stopped before hitting the car in front of us, stopped at the lights. Then turned to me and said I was going to smash into them. But I didn't. Yeah, he didn't last long after that. It was weird and looking back it didn't make sense what he said, but it scared the shit out of me at the time. Guy asked me to move in with him on our second date. He lived in a remote house somewhere on the Oregon coast and at the time I lived in Portland. Was pretty sure if I did move in I'd never be heard from again, haha. Also told me about how every other girl he dated seemed to be embarrassed of him and wouldn't introduce him to her friends and eventually they got scared off and hoped I wouldn't be like them. Yeah. Nope. We went to an amusement park and she demanded we rode the same ride 4 times in a row and would throw a fit anytime I suggested anything else. The line for that ride was over 2 hours each time and we basically waited in lines for the whole day. The line for that ride was over 2 hours each time. That's a complete disaster. It would have to be a bloody great ride to be worth waiting 2 hours for even once. If it's getting to that point, they probably want to operate a ticket system. Mind you, if this was Disneyland, they'd probably use that convenience as an excuse to screw you out of even more money. Best comment of the day. Here's my story. Sometime during late 2010/early 2011, I was out with a buddy of mine at a club. While he was sitting down and drinking a Long Island iced tea, I was walking around looking at the club and the atmosphere. Shortly afterwards, I'm confronted by this hot girl who had asked me to take her camera and take a pic of her with her friends. I had no problem with that, and I did it. The girl herself was definitely out of my league, so I didn't even waste time trying to hook up with her. Shortly later, one of said girl's female friends, another looker, decides to come and dance with / on me in a flirtatious way. Just as I was about to get into the dance with her, the girl from before, the same person I decided to show a little common courtesy to not too long ago, decides to cock block me by going up to her friend and pulling her to the side, telling her, "Don't dance with him. He's a stranger." I'm now pissed, and I get up to ask the girl why she just did that. Her response was not responding, but deciding to dance it off and to try and disappear into the crowd of partygoers. I can understand girls at parties and clubs looking after their friends, and I have no problems with that. However, I do hate it when they do shit like this, when there's nothing out of the ordinary, and when you're trying to do one of the things parties and clubs exist for, to be sociable, and to obviously have fun. I honestly believe this chick and chicks with her mindset went on to unintentionally help create incels.